I've been tormenting myself for a long time with all kinds of pieces, a symphony, chamber music, and other stuff, and nothing will come of it. Above all, I was always used to everything being clear to me, but it seems that it's not going the way it used to. I'm just not going to do any more. My whole life I've been a hard worker. Now for once I'm going to be good and lazy. These sentiments, expressed by Johannes Brahms in a conversation with a colleague during the summer of 1890, are indicative of the combination of anxiety and ambivalence with which the composer faced his final years. His double concerto for violin, cello, and orchestra, written 3 years earlier, had received a lukewarm reception, and since then the volume and scope of his output had markedly decreased. Although Brahms' traditionalism had made him a natural opponent of the new German school represented by Wagner and Liszt, that battle had taken place within aesthetic boundaries he found recognizable. But the trends in new music that were developing as the 20th century loomed, such as Expressionism, Impressionism, and the gradual collapse of the acoustically based harmonic language that had been foundational in music for centuries, left him feeling both bewildered and vaguely irrelevant. And as a 57-year-old man living at a time when the average lifespan of a European male was less than 50 years, the sight of loyal friends and associates succumbing, one after another, to serious illness and death increased Brahms' awareness that, in spite of his own robust health, the day when he would join the majority might not be forestalled much longer. It was within this atmosphere of uncertainty that Brahms undertook what he claimed would be his final composition, his String Quintet No. 2 in G major, Opus 111. Although he'd begun that summer of 1890 afflicted with a growing sense of artistic sterility, it appears that his willingness to cast off the burden of regular creative work had a liberating psychological effect, which he described to a friend. Recently I started various things, symphonies and so on, but nothing would come out right. Then I thought, I'm really too old, and I resolved energetically to write no more. I considered that all my life I had been sufficiently industrious and had achieved enough. Here I had before me a carefree old age that I could enjoy in peace. And that made me so happy, so contented, so delighted, that all at once the writing began to flow. This return of Brahms' former fluency was supplemented by a less complicated psychological stimulus, namely the appearance in Vienna of a mezzo-soprano of extraordinary artistic gifts and physical beauty named Alice Barby. Barby's musical background was unusually broad. She had made her debut as a concert violinist at the age of 7, and she was also a skilled pianist. Her overall musicianship, as well as her firm command of multiple languages, made her one of the great concert singers of her time, and her affinity for the German lieder repertoire was particularly renowned. In Brahms' estimation, we could all learn from her. She sings with uncommon control, strictly in time, and strives above all to gain full awareness of the structure of the song she is performing. The sight of Brahms squiring Barby around Vienna soon became commonplace, and he later confessed that after he'd reached middle age, she was the only woman he'd ever wished to marry. It appears that the relationship foundered over Brahms' lack of interest in fatherhood, but they would always hold each other in high esteem. He served as an accompanist during her 1894 farewell recital in Vienna, and when Brahms died 3 years later, Barby was the only woman in the immediate funeral party, and the first person to throw a handful of earth upon Brahms' casket after it was placed in his grave. The atmosphere of renewal that characterizes the G major quintet was immediately identified by Brahms' friends. One longtime confidant exclaimed that it was the work of a 30-year-old, and his biographer Max Kalbeck said the music reminded him of the unalloyed joy Brahms would express when visiting the famed Viennese amusement park known as the Prater. The quintet marked a temporary retreat from the austerity that had increasingly defined his music, and a return to the fundamental optimism that had undergirded even his most serious works up until the mid-1880s. melodies. This becomes immediately apparent in the vigorous, waltz-inflected first movement, which begins with a hail of pulsating G major chords against which the cello declaims a joyously heroic theme Brahms had reportedly considered for a symphonic project. The more introverted middle movements, an adagio in theme and variations form, and an allegretto in the spirit of a wistful minuet, are exquisite examples of the intimate musical voice Brahms had inherited from Schumann. The first movement's high spirits then return in the finale, a movement infused with the rhythms and energy of the Hungarian folk music that had made his early piano quartet in G minor so popular. It was also a nod to Brahms' old friend, the great Hungarian violinist Joseph Joachim, who had suggested that the composer's earlier F major string quintet needed a companion. In a sense, the G major quintet was both an ending and a beginning for Brahms. It provided a psychological capstone to a previous phase of his work, renewed his artistic confidence, and inspired a creative Indian summer, a period spanning the last 6 years of Brahms' life, during which he composed clarinet chamber music and works for solo piano of exceptional beauty, masterpieces that captured the waning days of Romanticism in the most vivid, unforgettable fashion.